Yes. So welcome to Civil Discourse. I'm Jamie Wojciechowski, and today we're talking about Jill Stein, the Green Party, and the future of the political revolution. We'll just start with everyone introducing themselves and kind of their history with the Green Party or lack thereof. If not in the Green Party, Janelle, what intrigues you about the Green Party? What you'd like to know more about the Green Party? So yeah, let's just start with Janelle.
Well, my name is Janelle Ryan. I am a filmmaker based in New York City. I consider myself more of an artivist than an activist. I'm really into social justice related films, and I believe that documentary film can be infinitely transformative. It's transformed my own life, and so I hope to use film to do the same. By day, I work in casting, and I'm very curious about the Green Party. In the past, I guess I've kind of been a Democrat by default because my immediate family is Democratic. And, I voted for Obama in 2008, and I declined to vote in 2012 out of sheer apathy because I kind of felt like, I didn't really feel like any significant changes had been made. And, of course, I voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary this year. And now I'm kind of even more apathetic than I was in 2012. I'm just kind of, at that stage of the impending doom of Donald Trump, but also, wanting to stand up for what I believe in. And I don't really feel like at this current time, Hillary Clinton aligns with, what I hope to see in terms of change. So I'm very curious about the Green Party and, what the realistic expectations are of the Green Party and, what it all means and everything like that, going forward.
Awesome. Randall, do you want to go next?
Sure. Sounds like Janelle and I are related. I, too, have worked in casting for many years, commercial casting, but also film and theatrical. I just started a company this past year that Jamie's a part of called What's Content. It's an original content creation company where we collaborate. It's a collective mindset as opposed to an individual ego-driven mindset, which is kind of the way Hollywood has always been structured. And we're kind of taking the model of Bernie, Jill, all the kind of progressive mindsets of it's us, not you, or it's us, not me, into actual creating content. And we've made a lot of strides, and we're getting excited over the next 6 months to kind of project into that arena. But I'm also a very passionate politico. I'm originally from South Carolina. I grew up in a very racist city in a very racist time. My dad was very progressive. Jamie knows his nickname is Big Daddy. He was about 5'6", weighed about 140 pounds at his heaviest. But he voted Democrat ever since he could vote. He voted for Kennedy all the way up to Obama, and he was very proud about that. And near the end of his life, he was disillusioned, if you will, and talking and ranting and raving. And had he still lived, my father would be wearing a doofus red hat saying, "Make America Great Again," and doing all the same things. So I understand where these Trump people come from in the sense of they kind of come from my bloodline. And they're not bad people. They're just uneducated people. And I'm trying to figure out where we go from here. Passionate Bernie guy. I've switched to the Green Party. I really believe in what the Green Party stands for, more so in many respects platform-wise than even the Democratic Party or even other offshoots of progressivism. I'm a big environmental advocate. I volunteer with wolves and wolf dogs up in Palmdale, California. My nickname is the Wolf. It's a very big part of the agenda that I want to help address in this country and this state. And I'm very privileged that we get a chance to meet with you, Mike, and talk about this. I want to run for local office as well under the Green Party here in California. And I'm tired of talking about it. I want to do something about it. And Janelle, I will say I'm probably the bridge between you and where Jamie and Mike are right now, because I was where you were probably 4 or 5, 6 years ago. And now I've stepped into this arena that I think is better for me. And I'm really interested to hear what Mike has to say about where we can go from here and really create a grassroots movement that actually changes something as opposed to just is a nice bumper sticker or a nice little bobblehead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mike, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. So, Mike Feinstein. I've been a Green since November 1988. I'm one of the co-founders of the Green Party here in California. I co-facilitated the founding meeting, which was February 4th, 1990 at Sac State, and have been with us for a long time. And when we debated starting this party, there was a lot of discussion about should the Green movement move into the electoral arena? If so, when? Can you have a green philosophy and still be part of a system that is problematic? Can you transform the system while being part of it? Can you be viable in the system while trying to transform it? And those are obviously very interesting questions. And also, there's the question of should we start a party now, which is when we did in 1990, or should we wait until there was some magical moment where all of the different social movements that should come together that would make up a viable new electoral force in this country, should we wait until they've all decided to do it together? Or does one part of that movement start and others come on at a different point? And I think we've been validated by starting the party when we did back then, because the two of you now have a ballot status party that you can be curious about and possibly join and get active in. And it's there now when this political opening moment came. Just like with Nader's 96 presidential campaign, that was a time where a lot of people were ready for independent politics because of how bad Bill Clinton was in his first term. And, things are going around like that a second time. So we're here, we're in place, and we have a party platform that is already the kind of things that Bernie Sanders campaigned on, but we were on these issues. We didn't have to lobby and have a great social movement to try and move Obama or Hillary Clinton to have the right position. We were on climate change in the 80s. We had gay and lesbian rights in the 80s. A whole lot of stuff like this was just where we came from to start with. So when you get into the strategy of how a party like that can be viable in our electoral system, there's a couple of things. One, most of the smaller parties in our history have only run for state or federal office. They get a small percentage of the vote. Maybe they're against the latest war of the Democrats and Republicans, but at a certain point, okay, nice, but what are you going to do with it? Whereas we focused here in California, we've elected 345 people to local office since our party's founding. So we have a chance to show that our ideas are viable, that we can govern, that we can work in the system, we can transform the system, and by running on that local level, we gain experience, and then we can make the argument on the higher levels that there should be a different electoral system. Our U.S. single-seat winner-take-all electoral system is the main impediment to representing political diversity in this country, and if we would move to multi-seat districts with proportional representation, everything would blossom and change. So if we're going to make an argument to have that kind of system, we have to be able to point to some successes. Look on a local level. On the local level, these people actually have good ideas. They should be part of the state level government or the federal government. People vote for them on local level. They return them to office. Our incumbent reelection rate is in the 80-something, high 80% range for city council members, for example. So that is kind of strategically part of it. And the move now for ranked choice voting, instant runoff voting, that's starting to move around the country, well, that was something we were campaigning on 15 years ago. Now it's starting to catch. And this presidential race, clearly on the top level, given how few people are positively voting for Clinton and Trump compared to voting against one of the others, really shows how much political space there is and why there's a need to have that kind of alternative electoral system. So this year, when we campaigned for Jill Stein, we also used that as an opportunity to talk about the kind of electoral reform that would give a voice, because there's no reason that people should have to go into the Democratic Party and fight a civil war every single time just to feel represented. And then maybe only some of the time they get it and sometimes not. Why not have a party that represents them 100% of the time and let the Hillary people have a party that represents them 100% of the time?
I want to and if anyone who's watching has any questions, you can comment on the side and we'll try to get those in as well. I think the big difference I see between the Green Party and both of the major parties is that the Green Party seems to be rooted in activism. And I feel like what we have lost in, our understanding of politics is the role of activism. And it seems like so many people think it's all about just voting and the establishment and getting things done with an establishment, and we don't have the narrative anymore that the way you actually challenge the establishment is from outside of the establishment pushing on it through organized movements. We're seeing that a little bit now with Black Lives Matter, and we had it with Fight for 15 and Occupy Wall Street, which I think kind of calmed down and then actually ramped up with Bernie's campaign. But even with Jamu being announced as Jill Stein's vice presidential candidate, the biggest difference between the candidates consistently within the Green Party is they're all activists. Like when you see Jill Stein, you see her actually going to these movements and walking with people. You don't see them just talking about it. Like I don't imagine seeing Hillary Clinton or anyone really in the Democratic establishment. Bernie Sanders was an exception that actually tries to create movements. I think that was the failure of really the Obama administration. In 2008, he ran on very similar message to Bernie about how none of this will get done unless there's a movement behind it. But then once he got elected, he never even tried to organize any kind of movement. They just tried to do everything within the establishment, and then were shocked when nothing happened and they just butted heads with everybody the whole time. So I guess the question is, how does the Green Party, being rooted in the activism, push its agenda while it doesn't have, I guess, a national voice in the Senate or in the House or in the presidency? If that makes sense. I'll start with you.
You're asking who?
Yeah.
So we like to think of ourselves as a movement party, so that when we generate candidates, it should be candidates who are already active in the social movements around those issues. And that's just a starting premise. So when you do that, you have a more integral, organic connection to the issue-based movements. It isn't like a candidate has to go and talk to these people and try and make some connection. They come from those people to start with. So that's our basic philosophy, and that keeps you grounded so that you aren't only organizing in elections, but you're actually involved in those social movements all the time, 24/7, all during the year. And that connection, that's what a bottom-up democracy is really about.
Yeah. And then
the one thing.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say the one thing that appealed to me about the Green Party and Jill Stein in particular was, I'm a Bernie guy, and when I saw the convention last week, and Jamie knows this very well, it was more of an injury emotionally to Bernie followers, more so than necessarily us not understanding the political ramifications or how the system works. We know how the system works. That's why we wanted to vote for Bernie. But what I saw Jill do was she acted. She went out in the streets. She consoled. It wasn't just for pictures, because they weren't putting cameras out there to cover it. So she knew that there wasn't going to get press coverage because the bought and paid for media had already said we're going to cover the convention no matter what. And what I loved about her was the example was love, compassion, understanding, listening, and speaking when speaking was necessary, but mostly listening to what people were saying and actually having empathy for them. We haven't had that in a leader. I mean, I guess you could point it to Jimmy Carter a little bit in the sense that he did walk the walk that he talked. Obviously, his life has bore that out. But he was an outlier anyway. He was a Bernie back in his day. And what I like about the Green Party and what I like about Jill in particular is it's not about me trying to be a career politician and have this power ego move of my library and my monuments and what I've done. It's about saving this country and saving our environment and leaving a legacy that is not necessarily about me, but about us. And that's where I think they've galvanized millennials. They've galvanized this whole generation that doesn't even look at the mainstream media as a source of news. They look at it as a source of amusement, as, oh my God, I can't believe my parents watch these people. That's what I've tapped into, and that's what I'm excited about, because I see this energy as a 45-year-old man going, I'm not a boomer and I'm not a millennial. I'm that in-between Xer, and I don't see a way to go other than in the direction of the Green Party. If I want air to breathe, if I want infrastructure if I want education, if I want healthcare, if I want all the things we need that every other Western society has, mind you, outside of us, I want those things for us that come in systemically from us, from our gut, from our collective American zeitgeist. I want it to come from us, like you said, from the ground up. And I don't see any other political party saying it's what do you want? We'll give it to you. We'll be your servant. It's we're doing this. You better like it. If you don't vote for us, you're an idiot. Quit whining. That preachy, condescending BS that we dealt with last week did nothing other than stiffen our resolve. And 44% of the American population is voting independent now. So you better watch that bear when you kick it, because it may turn around and rip your face off. And when I mean that, I mean it may not be Trump or Hillary. We could wake up on November 9th and it's Jill Stein for real, because we just don't know where this electorate can be swayed. It's like a swarm of bees right now, and it's really afraid, and it's going whichever way the wind is blowing or whichever way the pheromones are kicking. And that's where I think Jill and I think the Green Party has a really opportune moment in time to really make a statement, get not if not the presidency, definitely relevancy.
What I would like to know, and I'm like all over the place. I'm like, because like Hillary Clinton just does not align with where my beliefs are right now. I am so for everything that the Green Party believes in, but at the same time, I'm like so weary of the Donald Trump situation, and it sucks because it's like, you know, it's real legitimate fear. For a very long time, I tried to ignore him and everything that was happening with him. And I continued to be amazed at the media coverage and the ground that he was breaking, and that, you know, just how many people were supporting him. And it's like, I feel like I'm at the point where either I don't plan on voting or I plan on voting for Jill Stein. And that sucks. You know, because I feel like my choice I've been stripped of my choice. You know, it's like you're literally choosing between the you know, the lesser of the two evils at this point. I'm not excited about, you know, a Hillary election. I'm not excited about that. To me, it just seems like business as usual. And so I want to know, like, kind of like, what does the Green Party, is the Green Party prepared for, you know, once again, not winning and, you know, potentially, you know, causing the Donald Trump presidency to happen? Like where do you guys stand on that? And what advice would you have for somebody like myself that's just kind of like, I'm kind of just like, fuck it at this point, you know?
Right. So in California in 2012, Barack Obama won by 2.9 million votes, almost 3 million. So, you know, assuming we have a larger population now, if 1 million progressives in California voted for Jill Stein instead of Hillary Clinton would win by 1.5 to 2 million votes anyway. So it's not a national election. It's a state-by-state election. There's only 10 states where it's close. So the narrative that they use to scare us, actually, assuming you accept that, that's only in a small number of states, and it's not here. But it's disingenuous when they use it for the whole country, because then it becomes an argument to not start any alternative anywhere, rather than saying you're right to advocate for an alternative, but it's dangerous in these few circumstances. So that's one of the problems. When I listened to Ben Shelsh's debate Jill Stein last week on Democracy Now!, he was playing that same sort of thing. And a guy like him, who's a generally very progressive guy, you know, kept saying, well, I really am sympathetic with the Green Party. Well, if you are, then why aren't you working for proportional representation and instant runoff voting and all that sort of stuff? But why are you playing this argument that it's a national issue? So in your case, you actually have a choice that you wouldn't have had because the Green Party is there. And what you do in California isn't going to change anything other than if you vote green and the green number increases in California, that's a sign to the larger parties to take those issues seriously. If you don't do that and you just give your vote to Hillary, then they can take it for granted.
I think there's an oversimplification that happens because that the spoiler narrative is exactly that. It's a narrative. And they like to bring out Ralph Nader, but then they don't. That's not really representative of what's happening now, because right now we're in a four-way race, not a three-way race. But they don't want to talk about that it's a four-way race. You'll never hear them bring up Gary Johnson in that narrative. And I think the thing that Jill Stein is actually, even if she loses, the thing that I now see more people talking about that she very much started was why Donald Trump exists. And it's historically, when you look at this, it's that when countries are neoliberal for so long, they always end up having this opposing faction that is extremely right-wing. We saw it in Germany, we see it right now. That's exactly what happened in Poland. And the whole idea that this election has to be about stopping Trump, if that's the only part of the narrative, then that's what we're going to be doing for the rest of time. Because if Hillary Clinton just gets into office and isn't pushed to the progressive place that she needs to be, we're just going to end up in 4 years with someone like Ted Cruz, and then in 4 years someone worse. Because history tells us that the longer the neoliberals are in power, the more extreme and the more powerful and the more people will back the counter-conservative movement. And Jill Stein's really the only person who's talking about that. And you see a little bit now when she goes on like the Young Turks, or she goes on Democracy Now! And she talks about these things. When she leaves, people will actually, those newscasters and stuff are asking other people about it. So it's now creating a narrative. So even if the Green Party loses, at least that narrative starting that we can't do this election by election by election, because eventually we will lose.
And it's weird because we went to go see Dinesh D'Souza's obvious propaganda piece, Hillary's America, last night. But in actuality, it was very well done. It was a very well made piece of documentary film. Obviously had a weird perspective at times, an odd nationalistic jingoism, if you will. But talking about the Democratic Party and the history of the Democratic Party and how the Democratic Party operates and how it's operated over its 240-year or 200-odd-year history is very dark. It's very depressing. It's not a good party. Its history, I mean, we only seem to think about the history of it in the past 15 years, but its history, because I'm from there, is horrible. The Democratic Party started the KKK. The Democratic Party started Jim Crow laws. The Democratic Party started all these things that are still systemically part of their culture, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
And we can elect all the women we want, and we can elect all the African Americans we want, but if the money sources and the systems behind the Democratic Party are still in place, their agenda is neoliberal, their agenda is corporatist, their agenda is not progressive, it is not grassroots. So you can be afraid of Donald Trump, and I've had a lot of people trust me, I've been very restrained compared to what I felt like doing over this time period, but a lot of the Democratic people in my life feel like cult members. Yeah. And they feel like when you've left the cult, it feels like you're leaving Scientology or like Jim Jones land. And they will ostracize you. Yeah, they will ostracize you. They will rip at your core. They will attack your character just because you say, no, I want to vote for somebody who I want to choose. And it's ironic to me that a party that emphasizes so much about a woman's right to choose when it comes to her body, which is right and I believe in, doesn't seem to think that that same woman has the same right to choose who she wants to vote for. She has to feel guilted into the fact that if you're not with her, then you're with a monster. Well, there's more hers in this race than just her. And there's more choices available to us, and the restriction of choice and the kowtowing and the bullying that we've received from the Democratic Party is now on full display. You can make fun of the Republican Party all you want. They didn't have the kind of protests going on in their convention that we did. They didn't have emails leaked that showed that the Democratic Party colluded actively against the Bernie campaign. And so you can point fingers and make fun of and have Khizr Khan come out and make Donald Trump look like an asshole. But, you know, the Democratic Party's got just as many blemishes. And I found it very interesting that a lot of Democratic leaders waited to the very last second to endorse. And in case of Al Gore, it was so tepid that you could almost read between the lines. So when your own fundamental historical part of your party doesn't want to be a part of you anymore, much like the Republicans rejecting Trump, you know that this country is coming apart at the seams, And like I said, this is a perfect opportunity for someone and a party movement like the Green Party, which really is something that is based in grassroots, to come completely into the fore and establish itself as a legitimate third option that will hopefully springboard us into an entirely, truly democratic process and not an oligarchy.
Yeah, and I want to go into some of the audience comments. Marjaloo1 says, Jill Stein points out that voting out of fear has only brought about the very things we are afraid of, which I agree with. And then Selena Vidya says, I think it's important to note that they hacked and exposed one party's email, but did not hack Republicans. It's a one-sided narrative that we're seeing because we're being exposed to specific information. And on that, I think that is very true. And I think the point to make here is the core difference between Bernie Sanders and the Green Party and Jill Stein is that Bernie Sanders believed that the revolution had to happen within the party, where the Green Party believes it happens without. And I think that's where everything Randall's talking about comes in, because it doesn't matter. It's not a Democrat problem. It's an establishment problem. It's the way it functions. And when you try to, you could have the best intentions, but when you try to do that within the establishment we have now, you have to compromise in ways that hurt actually what you're trying to do. And that's what the outside movements in the Green Party are trying to change, so that doesn't have to happen, because it's all about, within the party, all about negotiating, and it's, oh, well, I'll endorse you, but then I have to get this, and then I have to get that, and it shouldn't. It's because of the corruption within the establishment and not necessarily just individual parties.
And sorry, so go ahead.
You guys,
no, you go ahead, Mike. I've talked enough.
Go ahead. Well, I mean, there's certainly rich soil to till about problems with the Democrats, but the fact is that in most of the countries that the U.S. is compared to, there are 4 or 5 or 6 parties in their national parliament. And the dialogue is not what is, so wrong with the Social Democrats or the Labor Party or whatever it is that's the center-left party there, but more of what's positive about the Green Party. So I think that where we need to focus, I mean, a lot of people feel jilted by the Democratic Party in the last primary for good reason, but there's a positive thing here, and that's the idea that you should be able to have a party that represents you directly, and that party should, or this country should have an electoral system that allows people from different parties all to get representation. And that's really where the political revolution will come. It's not going to come from overturning Citizens United and still having large single-member districts with winner-take-all elections. That's still going to demand a lot of money, and it's going to come from somewhere. Whereas if you go to proportional representation, if a party can get 20% of the vote and get 20% of the seats, then you campaign to your base, and your base can elect you, however large that is. Most proportional representation systems, the threshold to get elected is 5%. So the bottom line here is, especially there for Janelle, somebody who's thinking about doing this, you can vote for what you believe in. You can feel good about your vote. In California, none of the fear factor issues are in play this time. But what voting for the Greens will do on a national level is call attention to the need for political diversity in the country. And then once that need is established, then you can argue about what's wrong with the electoral system so that we could have that kind of representation. And really, this country probably would end up having 5 or 6 parties that are viable. The Ds, the Rs, the Libertarians, the Greens, probably a far-right xenophobic party like the Constitution Party. Nationally, that's really where Trump should have run this year, and then maybe a reform party-ish kind of party as well. And that's really what would be healthy in this country, and that's a political revolution. That's really revolution, because then whatever voices are in the society, see, it's fine to have majority rule, but our current system eliminates a lot of the voices before they get to the table. We need to have all the voices at the table and then have majority rule, where our winner-take-all electoral system eliminates voices for people like us before you get to the table. And then if it's only majority rule between the Democrats and Republicans, it just moves further to the right. And when you keep then in that system voting for the lesser two evils, you end up with the evil of two lessers.
So do you feel that with the political revolution that's happening now that really was championed by Bernie for so long, that election reform should be added to that movement, or it should be its own movement? And how do you build the movement?
Well, it's important to recognize these movements were there. Bernie Sanders did a great thing by giving an outlet for them, but it wasn't like he built a movement. He gave a voice to a movement that was there and wanted expression. So the question now should be, okay, if you're disappointed with the result of the Sanders campaign simply going into the Democratic Party, who knows how much really changed as a result of all of that, then you just have to say, all right, how do I get options outside of the Democratic Party? So the movement for electoral reform is really, you either have to decide that you're going to cast all your lot with trying to work only within the Democratic Party. Where did Jesse Jackson get with that? You know, there's so many examples. That's already been an experiment that's happened and failed multiple times. So given that, the revolution necessitates electoral reform to give the different voices the opportunity to have representation. Again, if you know, he's trying to start an institute to help fund progressive candidates, well, those people are already running and winning some of the time and losing some of the time in Democratic primary. I mean, that's already happening. It's not like, so, and the other thing to remember is that with the Sanders campaign, there was the benefit of being on national television in the presidential debates. So Bernie raised a ton of money, but all the down ticket people who are going to run in ensuing years for state legislature, they're not going to have any of that. There's not going to be that kind of free exposure that came in this lucky one time where you got a one-on-one with Hillary Clinton with the DLC. So understanding that those resources and that publicity are not going to be around for all these down ticket races, the idea that anything more than a handful of seats here or there might flip from centrist Democrats to center-left Democrats to maybe some left Democrats, that's no revolution. That's really slow incremental change. And there's more likely to be change inside the Democratic Party if there's a Green Party that's viable and then makes them have to respond to that. So yes, the Sanders revolution in my mind needs to focus on getting rid of the single seat winner-take-all district system that we have and move to multi-seat districts with proportional representation. If we have that, we will see a flowering of debate. And one example would have been in the Congress when the Democrats and Republicans voted to invade Iraq. The Greens and the Libertarian parties had a great commonality at that point on being anti-war and anti that invasion. And in fact, it was the Green foreign minister in Germany, where we were in a coalition government with the Social Democrats, Joschka Fischer, who said no to Donald Rumsfeld and said, you haven't convinced me, we're not joining your coalition of the killing. So, you know, anyway, so that's my 2 cents. We would have seen in the Congress an alliance, instead of just Democrat and Republican homogeneity pro-war, we would have seen other parties, Greens and Libertarians, saying anti-war, and then they would have increased their vote in the 2004 congressional elections after the earlier invasion, and that would have had a massive impact on the Democratic Party. All of the marches that all of us went to oppose the Iraq invasion in the early 2000s, I mean, you know, there was hundreds of thousands of us, millions around the planet. We didn't move any politicians. We didn't. But a proportional representation system, our winning on a peace agenda would have moved the other parties. And that's really where and unfortunately, the one downside of the Bernie campaign is it's led a lot of people into the Democrats who won't hear about this as an alternative and therefore think they got to just dig in there and fight these precinct battles year after year and try and move the Democratic Party, and the electoral system's going to stay the same.
So we had a comment from Marjaloo1 again. Social media had a lot to do with Bernie's success. We have 3 months and everyone's paying attention.
Yes.
And I think social media is a very interesting thing because Randall was talking about the convention from last week and how the mainstream media didn't see it. But if you were online, you probably saw a very different convention than if you were watching the mainstream media. And I think a lot of that had to do with Bernie's demographic gap, is that young people tend to get their media mostly from online, and that's where he had most visibility. And I think even with Jill polling at 2 to, I think the highest was 7% in some of the polls, I think a lot of it
She went from 7 to 3, and she's back on 5. CNN just came out with a poll today. She's back to 5. 8 people of color,
and
3
last
among
time
white
she
people.
didn't even get 1%. And that hasn't been more media coverage. It's been the power of social media. So I do think as social media becomes dominant for the way people get news, either the mainstream media is going to die out and that's not going to be a factor, or it's going to have to adapt. So I think it's all very good because we're able to get out our message and more types of messages than we ever were before.
And I'm going to use my nerd head here because my career before I came into acting and creative arts was I was in technology, and I heard about a year and a half ago this rumbling about trying to slow the internet down or have a separate internet for, high end and low end. And I think that's a complete, absolute attack on the use of social media, the internet, and alternative sources of media to keep people from educating themselves so that they control information. So we've got to constantly stay vigilant on that, for one thing. I was going to ask you, Mike. I've already re-registered. I'm with the Green Party. I've already contacted local people about getting into work groups and running for office. What advice would you give someone like me who is educated, articulate, all those things you want, but is coming into a new party and a new philosophy and a new...
Where do you live? And what do you think about running for?
Beach, California. I don't know yet. I'm investigating what's out there. It's going to be local, but I guess I would probably want to get in my work group first and get to know more people in my area and the party and get involved locally with whatever my party is doing locally, and then just kind of see where the opportunities open up that make sense for me is what I was.
So in the city of Los Angeles, there is a very positive option called the Neighborhood Council. And there are 93 neighborhood councils with about 1,100 positions in all of the city council districts across the city of LA. And they are advisory to the city council and to the planning commission for those areas. And when you get involved there, you start learning how the city government works. So when you run for office, I mean, it's great to have great issues. I was on the city council in Santa Monica for 8 years. I was mayor for 2 years. And it's really important to not just have great ideas, but show you could actually implement them in the local system. So I would start going to the Venice Neighborhood Council meetings. They just had an election in June for 2-year terms, but in 2 years there's terms, and that's a chance to build up, some record of achievement there. And it doesn't mean that necessarily you only have to be elected to the council. They have working groups and committees there on a whole host of issues. So, the city of LA is a bit challenging because it's the least democratic city council in the United States. Per capita representation in the city of Los Angeles is the worst overall in the entire country. Only 15 seats for 4 million people. Those are as unrepresentative as congressional districts are. So it's very difficult to win a city council seat in Los Angeles, and that's why those neighborhood councils are so important, because that provides a chance for hundreds and thousands of people to get elected and get local government experience. Now, once you make a name for yourself, whether you're elected that way, running, whether you're elected or not, then there are a lot of advisory boards and commissions on all kinds of levels in government. So whether you're an elected official or even on an advisory board, advisory commission, you have a really good chance to impact public policy that way as well. And you start to make a name for yourself by being on your neighborhood council. And then the local council members says, oh, wow, look what so-and-so is doing. Maybe I should appoint, her or him to the next vacancy on something. So those are two levels that make a lot of sense. in a behemoth like the city of Los Angeles. And your council member is actually a good guy, Mike Bonin. He was a registered Green in the early 1990s, and then had to register Democrat to work in Councilmember Ruth Galanter's office, and eventually he worked then for Bill Rosendahl and got elected, which also shows how tough it is to break in on the higher levels where the size of the electoral district is really big. That's where there's a pressure to become a Democrat, whereas a much smaller city here in Santa Monica, I was able to get elected a couple times as a Green. So one of the things that the Green Party in LA County is talking about is to try and increase the size of the LA City Council substantially. New York and New York and Chicago have 51 and 52 seats. We have 15 here. So one of the things we're debating and then trying to make part of the 2017 elections in the city of LA is, should we advocate for maybe 15 to 17 three-seat districts by ranked choice voting, or 50 or 51 very small districts, or relatively smaller districts, just to change that power dynamic. So that's another case where it's the Green Party that talks about changing the democratic structures to give everybody a voice.
That helps me. That helps me a lot. Thank you.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
Go, Janelle. I'm curious how you're feeling.
It's just great. No, it's just great. They make everything so complicated. It blows my mind. Like, I'm listening to Mike talk and I'm just like, what are you talking? Like, you know, the fact that, like, you know, the amount of seats and like all this kind of stuff. And it's like, but you need to know those things in order to, like, you know, truly, you know, infiltrate or dismantle or reform or whatever it is you want to do. I feel like I wanted to touch earlier on what you said earlier about, you know, a lot of Sanders supporters that were kind of led into the Democratic Party, and now they feel like, you know, they can probably reform it from within. There's also people that are just completely disillusioned and now want nothing to do with politics in general. And I think that, you know, that's also a shame, because while I do believe in dismantling the system, I also believe that, you know, in terms of like a short-term, you know, reform, that we should try to reform the system because it can actually make short-term change. And so I'm also kind of in the middle there as well. I'm like I said, I'm either at the point where I want to vote for Jill Stein, or I'm just going to be like, you know what, I'm not voting this year again, because it's what's the point. And just to clarify, I'm in New York, not Los Angeles. But I know that, like, New York is also a very democratic state. So I know that, you know, that also doesn't matter. But it's just a lot, you know, like when you just want some type of change to be made. I don't like the way that things are. And I find the whole thing to be extremely confusing. And, you know, Sanders was an easy, understandable choice. And I think for many people like myself, it's like they just don't, I guess they don't see what the point of the Green Party is. But, you know, having had you explain it a little bit better and what the whole point is, despite whether you win or not, it definitely makes a lot more sense.
And imagine now if Jill was in the debates, you know, this is, I mean, here we're on a web blab thing. I mean, we don't get the kind of exposure we should.
Yeah.
And if she was in those debates, it would be incredible. And it's important to realize that the Commission on Presidential Debates is a private organization set up by the Democratic and Republican Party that took the debates away from the League of Women Voters so they could run them themselves and control them themselves. And the criteria and the threshold for other candidates to be in the debates is set by the parties that don't want the other candidates. From our perspective, what our national platform says is there should be a publicly funded public debates commission that puts on the debates, and all candidates who are on the ballot, on enough ballots to have a mathematical chance of winning the presidency, would then be included in the debates. At the same time, we call for removing the tax deductible exemptions that the largest corporations in the country get for giving to the Commission on Presidential Debates. So right now, it's big corporate America gets tax breaks to fund the Democrats and Republicans' monopoly on the presidential debates. And just the opportunity to say that on national television, imagine how many people will be sitting at home and going, really? I thought the League of Women Voters did this. I mean, they do it in my community. They do it for school board. So it would just change so many things. Here in California, we just voted to support lowering the voting age to 16, for example. Even within the current system of the winner take all, that would blow people's minds, getting that, just those voices in as well. There's so many refreshing things that could come out for electoral reform that should be part of the next stage of the Sanders revolution. And then the other thing to remember, and if you're in New York, certainly the Occupy movement must be dear to your hearts. The Democratic mayor of Los Angeles at the time, Antonio Villaraigosa, or actually, he was the mayor at the time. He organized Democratic mayors in 18 cities to, in a coordinated manner, shut down all of our Occupy encampments. And they did that to get those folk off the table so that Obama could run against Romney and paint Romney as this, 47, remember his comments about the 47%, the lowly 47%, but to have no flank on his left who would have been challenging him on those economic justice issues. So that, because Antonio Villaraigosa was I think he was the chair of the 2012 Democratic Convention. So the idea that the Democratic Party, when Bernie is trying to lead effectively the Occupy movement and other movements this time back into the Democrats, when it was the Democrats who wanted to shut those movements down a couple of years ago because they were inconvenient at the time and would make Obama look bad. It's just important to remember that. And I appreciate that Bernie took this one shot at the machine and whacked it. And now there's a whole lot of people who are looking for a new place to go. That's important. We have to run with that.
Yeah, and I think similar to what I said earlier, just about people feeling kind of left out and not know what to do or apathetic to the political process, is to remember actually how change occurs. And it does change through movements pushing on the establishment. So the politics can be confusing and it can make you upset and you can just hate everything about it. But you actually, as a citizen, have so much power just by being part of movements. And just look at Black Lives Matter or the Fight for 15. And those are really the things that cause change to happen. It's not the politicians. The politicians are just coming up with bills in response to these movements. Like they talk about, well, what if we had, if the Democrats had both houses and the presidency? Nothing would happen unless there was a mandate from the people to do things.
Well, they did. They passed NAFTA.
Yeah.
Under Bill Clinton. That's what they did.
Right.
Or under Reagan, they increased our defense budget to make us into the biggest war crime
that was one of the places
tribunal in
that
the history of humankind.
Could have gone a lot further, and Jill does, in that when he was getting challenged, even by the Paul Krugmans, about how can he fund a lot of the great, free education and single-payer healthcare, all those sort of things, he never talked about cutting the military budget in any substantial way. And for us as a party, that's a big deal for us to really promote peace as a way of reducing conflict, to promote sustainability and justice and resource use around the planet in order to promote more peace. And to cut the military budget significantly, that's a major way, and that didn't come out. And that should be on the, on the table in the November or hopefully the October debates, if Trump even agrees to debate. As we're hearing now, he might try and back out because he doesn't know anything.
I mean, the crazy thing about it, and I think I was watching Jill Stein's interview with Chris Hedges today. She was talking about how the war in Afghanistan and Iraq probably going to end up totaling $6 trillion. And, and what did we get? We got ISIS. We spent $6 million to create a bigger monster and a bigger threat. And so it's so antithetical to our self-preservation as a country to spread ourselves out in this militaristic kind of Genghis Khan manner, when really our infrastructure is falling apart. Our citizens, what are we gaining? Is it, or he's going to be a country of 25 people?
So Janelle, an argument then about what the Green Party would do with that sort of issue is for us, what if we had not invaded those countries and invested that in a 21st century public transit system for the entire country? So instead of invading them for oil, we got rid of the need. And then subsidize affordable housing in the transit adjacent smart growth developments so that people wouldn't be gentrified out by the public investment and then could have walkable, livable, lifestyles. That's all the great urban planners already get that. That was actually the funding choice we made by invading Iraq and Bush saying, well, we'll take their oil and we just invested billions of dollars to keep pushing the priority of an oil-based world economy, where we could have taken that money and invested it here. And that's what green politicians would have said, as not only going against the warmongering, but would have also talked about how that really could have served domestic needs.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many domestic needs. I mean, it's like when Bernie Sanders was proposing having free public education for college. Oh, where's that money going to come from? But it's like you said, we invest all this money into war and also to the militarization of the police force and numerous things that are harmful for the community and don't actually help us to evolve as mankind, humankind, womankind, or whatever. Like, we're just, like you said, are we going to just be 25 people surrounded by, a bunch of guns and militarization? And that's not the future that I envision for myself.
I think it's hard because
my future
we live
children.
in a time that's so partisan that you never get the full picture. Everyone just shows the parts that fit into their narrative. So you're talking about the education and where's the money going to come from. And you never heard anyone talking about how much money actually goes back by having an educated workforce into the economy. That having an educated workforce, you get more money back into the economy than you do that you put into it. And we were being asked what is the impact that the Green Party hopes to have on education, student loans, and debt. I mean, Jill's for getting rid of all of student debt, the same way that we bailed out the bankers. And I'm not gonna, I don't speak for her campaign, so I don't want to go into the specifics. Go look, she explains it very beautifully. But the thing is that for a lot of people, they say, well, that's crazy, that'll never happen. But you look at how the Green Party functions, and a lot of times it plants the seeds for what the progressives fight for within the Democratic Party as well. Like, you see they were for marriage equality and all these things. Like, it would not surprise me that in the next 3 cycles, at some point, that's what they're fighting for, is just getting rid of the student debt, because you basically have crippled the economy with a whole generation of people who can't buy anything. Yeah.
So, and it's
generations of people. Generations. Yeah, it goes back to my generation and before too.
When we underfund education, we're essentially taxing young working class people. And it's a wealth transfer from allowing the largest corporation and the richest people to hold on to money and not paying for the education to move our society ahead, and instead putting that tax burden on the student fees. I mean, it's a direct social justice issue and should be articulated in that manner. So when we talk about tax reform, it's not some stale issue, but it's really a social justice question for young students.
And for me, the thing that's drawn me, just so you know, Janelle, to the Green Party, I mean, I grew up, like I said, in the South. I was lucky that I had a progressive father, but my mother was not. So as a child, I, of course, would go in the direction that I wanted acceptance, so I was Republican. And by the age of 13, I realized this is a horrible place to be. And so I sided with my dad, and I became more progressive and more democratic. And it was just an evolutionary process for me, just like what we're talking about here. You grow, you learn, you experience, you engage with people of color, of people from the LGBTQ community. And I just lived life. I moved to a bigger city, Atlanta. Then I moved to Los Angeles. I just grew and expanded and wasn't willing to deny knowledge. And it's just naturally led me to a party that fulfills what I'm looking for in the Green Party. So you're already on the path. You're not going to stay in the Democratic Party. I promise you that, because they've already proven that they're going to beat you again. You know, they're that abusive husband that if you go back to them, I promise you, they're going to beat you again, and you're going to be talking to your mom about how you fell into the door, and it's going to be ridiculous all over again. So you got to just get a new guy or a new girl. You got to just get a new partner that trusts you and respects you. I had horrible relationships when I was a Republican or a Democrat because I wasn't true to myself. I get into more of a progressive mindset. I've met my fiance and soulmate, and our viewpoints are in alignment. So it's all about your path and your journey, and having mentors like Mike and having such smart and educated people like Jamie when it comes to these issues, but also just his empathetic side, are going to shield you from any doubt, I think. And you're just going to naturally step into your own when it comes to this. I think you're already there. You're just trying to figure out how do I articulate this to myself. Yeah, I'm just kind of,
like I said, it's the Donald Trump thing that is like kind of has me all screwed up, because I was reading a really great article. I don't even know if I still have it up. It was about a Bernie Sanders delegate who, you know, he's surrounded by a lot of people who are Bernie or bust. And he's a, you know, a black man, and he feels like he doesn't have the privilege of being able to be Bernie or bust, because the likelihood of a Donald Trump presidency is not something that he's not okay with. You know, he can't risk 4 years of tyranny for, you know, standing up for what he believes in, which is just basically not Donald Trump. And that you know, that sucks. You know, that he feels like he has to feel that he can't take a chance.
So I'm looking at the 2012 New York State presidential results. Obama 62.6%, Romney 36%. Obama wins by 1.65 million votes. So I guess if your friend is in New York State, again, Trump's going to get slaughtered in New York State. That's just where the votes are. So if 500,000 progressives vote green instead, Hillary wins anyway. But now you've made a statement to her going forward. And your friend actually gets more because, wasn't Hillary the one who said we need to bring them to heel?
Trust me, I am not a Hillary supporter.
Just saying that she's not such a great option either. So yes, it's lesser of evils maybe, but in New York State, send them a signal that you don't buy into it.
Yeah, I mean, just for instance, Black Lives Matter came up during the presidency of a black president in the Democratic Party. So it's not like bad, crappy, horrible things haven't happened in that community under the guise of someone that's supposed to be our guy.
Yeah, no, of course. That's not my issue. Like, I don't need to be, talked out of Hillary's politics. Like, in my opinion, she's full of shit. Like, I don't really feel like any of the things that she's saying, I don't believe anything that she says. I don't want another Clinton presidency. I'm not into making history with, a first women president. That doesn't mean anything to me, because at the end of the day, the community is still going to suffer, and things are still going to potentially either be business as usual, or, she might vote in another hard, measure, like mass incarceration or whatever the case may be. But it's like, I guess, just the irony that we have this Trump thing happening at the same time. I'm just like, I can't believe it. Like, I said, I did not even vote in 2012 because I was just like, I don't think Obama did anything he said he was going to do. So now I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, I'm voting not necessarily for Hillary, but against Trump. And that sucks. And that's what makes me feel like my choice has been stripped from me. I wasn't a super enthusiastic Bernie Sanders supporter. I was more of a cautious Bernie supporter because I'm cautious about politics in general. But I do recognize that there's a clear problem happening this year. So I'm like, okay, perhaps I should exercise my right to vote. But I don't want to just be voting against somebody. I want to be voting for somebody. But I'm kind of on the fence of what, is there a point? to
I think there's a few
voting
things.
for the Green
One,
Party?
I would like to
what
say
would
again,
the big change
we're
for
talking
that
about
be?
the numbers in states like New York and California, and those numbers are actually higher because this is a four-way race. So there is Gary Johnson, who's also taking support away from Donald Trump and a little bit support from Hillary as well. Right. And that spoiler
he's not taking from anybody.
mentality, I'm saying, if you're going to say that Jill is taking away votes from Hillary, there's also a candidate then in that mindset that's taking away from Trump. So you have to acknowledge that. And the other thing I would like to say is that just for people who legitimately, and when you say feel like they have to support Hillary because out of fear of Trump, is that if you believe in the Green Party ideals, yes, as a Green Party member, we would love your vote, but that's not the only way you promote the Green Party and those ideals. So you can absolutely vote for Hillary out of fear if that's how you feel at your core and it's not going to change, and then go run for office as a Green Party member, or go organize something with the Green Party, or any of that stuff. So I think the agenda should be, if you believe in what the Green Party represents, is helping the Green Party, and that's more than just voting.
So on that note,
yes,
I think we're at about an hour. And I'm getting, I just got an email from somebody in Koreatown saying, "Dear LA Greens, I'm a writer and university lecturer. If you need somebody to run for office, keep me in mind." So we're getting a lot of, it's interesting. So I got to respond to some of this because we're getting so many people from the Bernie campaign contacting us. That's great.
Well, that's what I would say to you, Janelle, as a final word is, it's not just your one vote, your one mind you may think is just that one thing. But if you're impacting 50 people in your life in any way, shape, or form to at least know, well, I love Janelle and she's amazing and she's with the Green Party, it can't be, I should at least investigate it. You're creating dialogue, you're creating thought, you're creating engagement, as opposed to someone going Green Party. I mean, that's what the problem is the media and a lot of operators inside both the Democratic and Republican parties have tried to marginalize additional thought outside of the two-party system because that means threats to their power and jobs. So I'm leaving the Democratic Party and joining the Green Party, not because I think my one vote's going to swing the election. I'm doing it because my one vote and my one decision is going to impact thousands of people in my life that ultimately will lead to the change I want. Thank you all for
being here. Next Monday, we are discussing mindfulness and how to bring mindfulness into activism and politics. So join us then. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.